What is up, freaks? It's your boy Marty Ben here to introduce this episode of Tales from the Crypt. I had the immense pleasure of sitting back down with our good friend Nick Bhatia. It's time to discuss. We discussed? What did we discuss? No, we discussed his new book, Layered Money, From Gold and Dollars to Bitcoin and CBDCs. Very incredible book. You'll hear it. We talk about it in the episode. And Layered Money and Bitcoin, how it's revolution, how we borked the monetary system. We fucked up the money. We need to fix the money. We're going to fix the world. I think you guys are going to enjoy this ep. It was brought to you by our good friends at the motherfucking Cash App. Help me stack sats, cents, sats, sell sats, and receive sats. We're saying sats. Because sats are the standard. For you freaks who are new to Bitcoin, new to this podcast, new to the world. What are sats, you may be asking? Sats are the smallest unit of a Bitcoin. One Bitcoin can be broken into 100 million Satoshis, or sats as we call them. I like to say we're stacking sats. You're constantly purchasing sats and DCAing into sats and using sats as a standard, a savings account, if you will. Cash App allows you to do that. I mentioned DCA, that's dollar cost average. If you just want to set it and forget it and buy a set amount of Bitcoin on a set cadence, Cash App allows you to do that daily, bi-weekly, or weekly. Mix it up there. It should be daily, weekly, bi-weekly, but you get the point, okay? Cash App's allowing stack sats, send sats, receive sats. They've got their boost program, which sometimes allows you to get sats back. On top of this, Cash App can be your bank account, or offering account numbers and routing numbers, so you get your paychecks direct deposited into the app and start stacking sats sooner. Let's get some alliteration here. Stacking sats sooner. It doesn't sound great. We'll work on it. If you haven't downloaded the Cash App yet, make sure you do. So when you do, use the code Stacking Sats. That's STACKINGSATS. You're going to get $10, and $10 is going to go to our good friends at Owls Lacrosse. Owls Lacrosse. Enjoy this episode with Nick. Go get his book. Grow your know. Understand what we're doing here with this Bitcoin revolution. Enjoy. Tiki.
You've had a dynamic where money's become freer than free.
If you talk about a Fed just gone nuts, all the central banks going nuts.
So it's all acting like safe haven.
I believe that in a world where central bankers are tripping over themselves to devalue their currency, Bitcoin wins. In the world of fiat currencies, Bitcoin is the victor.
I mean, that's part of the bull case for Bitcoin.
If you're not paying attention, you probably should be.
What's up, freaks? Just ninja launched on our guest, Nick Bhatia. Nick, welcome back to the podcast.
What's up, Marty? What's up, freaks?
Nothing, man. We're just reminiscing about our children. This is why we're in it, right?
Absolutely. Congrats on your son about to turn 1 year old. That's awesome. My daughter's 3, and we got to enjoy it. It's the best time.
It really is. No, you're saying it goes by fast. Like, I'm like astonished that he's going to be 1 year old. It's like, holy crap, man. Slow down. Run around. He got teeth. Starting to talk a little bit. It's like, oh my gosh.
Just got to enjoy every moment.
Right. And try to make a better world for them. Right. And that's what I try to do with this podcast. And you're trying to do with your education about Bitcoin and its potential to create a new financial stack, right? Layered money. Shout out to you for writing and publishing this book. It's fucking incredible. And that's what we were just chatting about. Like, how do we want to structure this conversation? I think let's start with layered money, obviously, from gold and dollars to Bitcoin and central bank digital currencies. I love this book particularly, just from the like quick skimming that I've done over the last couple of weeks when I've had time, because again, you get into very deep historical context to sort of highlight the evolution that monetary systems have had throughout history, and setting that up for the potential future monetary system, layered monetary system that could be built on Bitcoin. So I know you've been working on this for a while. How's it feel to finally have it out there?
It feels awesome. It's 3 years in the making for sure. But I didn't actually start writing the book until April. So about, a month into the pandemic where, I sat down and it's just like, the time is now for Bitcoin. It had just had that complete capitulation below 4K. And, I knew that the pandemic world would bring about this awareness, and the urgency, just fully took hold. And I had already quit my job in the bond market. I was writing for OpenNode, and I was, writing my own articles and exploring this new, what a Bitcoin profession would look like for me. And, when the world shut down, it was just like, this is the time the book has to be written. I had set up this layered concept just a few months before, and then I just hunkered down and basically, we bet, my family, we bet our life on this book, that this is a message that needs to be told. It's a story that needs to be written. I'm the one to do it. And, we'll sacrifice everything around us to put this out. And here we are. And I'm really happy that we did it. And I say we because, it's a family effort. My wife and I, it's a joint effort when you're trying to do something like this. And she actually has published 2 children's books already. You can see them right here and right here above mine, because mine's the 3rd one in the family here. But yeah, so she published 2 children's bilingual books in English and Hindi, her native tongue. And, my daughter is growing up in this household where I speak English, and my wife speaks English first, but then she speaks Hindi with her parents, and, Hindi when she goes back home to India. So it was a way for her to teach her language to her daughter. And, this is a way for me to teach money to my daughter too. And so we're both, she's the first author in the family. I'm the second, and she had, inspired me to do this. And so it's a joy, and it is a joint effort. And the whole last month, after the book was pretty much done, she took over the editing process and helped me really refine it.
Oh yeah, I love the family effort. And it says she's teaching your daughter Hindi, which is a language. It's arguable that money is a language, right? The money language that helps you define and describe value, right, in the markets. And I think that's like a perfect segue into like the time value of money and how these layered money systems have evolved over time. Again, you get to a historical context going back to the Medici Bank in Italy, and the way that layered money system worked with gold and silver reserves in the bank in the middle, and then you had these bills of exchange, and then you go into the Antwerp bankers and their bills of exchange and notes, and how this evolved. And so, did you know this history before going to the book, or did you sort of find a deeper understanding through research, and what was most illuminating to you?
Yeah. So what happened, the first thing that inspired this concept of layered money, in terms of not Bitcoin and Lightning, because that is something that I had written about already in 2018. But this idea that the dollar is a hierarchy itself, that reading that paper in financial academia and building on that thesis that the dollar is a layered system too. And so where does Bitcoin fit into the future of layers of money and money hierarchy in the future? I decided to tell the story of the hierarchy of money, based on this academic concept that credit systems are inherently hierarchical because they come from balance sheets. So if a financial institution owns something, it's their asset, and they issue something, it's their liability. And that itself creates a hierarchy between the bank's assets and the bank's liabilities. The assets are senior to the liabilities. And this is what layers of money is trying to tell, the story that balance sheets and a hierarchy of balance sheets itself, it dictates the way that our monetary system works. So I didn't know the history of Antwerp or even the history of Renaissance Florence and their coinage, but when I decided to tell this story of layered money, I had to figure out where to start the story. And so I thought about coins versus gold itself, and thought that this idea of a denomination, a coin, that we could also name our wealth in, not just gold, but the gold florin, because it was one unit, and that unit ended up being constant for over 300 years. So people actually started to denominate their lives, their businesses, in florin. And I read a book called The Economy of Renaissance Florence that was foundational to the start of the story of layered money. And, if you guys want to geek out on it, it's an awesome read. Some of it is, it's a long book, but there's so much on the monetary system and how it evolved in the 1100s, 1200s, 1300s. And so that book was the first book that I dove into and decided to start the story in Renaissance Florence. Because actually the title of the book, when I wrote it, was The Renaissance of Money, because Bitcoin is the rebirth of money. And the story started in Renaissance Florence. So I thought that Renaissance of Money would be a poetic title and a way to describe what I'm trying to talk about. It ended up being the title of chapter 7 only. And of course, my wife named it Layered Money, which is genius. She helped me figure out that name. But the history of Renaissance Florence, and then the history of Antwerp, like where it went from there. So the Economy of Renaissance Florence, the book, led me to Antwerp, because there were passages in there that said, as Florence faded away in its importance, the money market basically was born and transferred into Antwerp. And then I read about Antwerp, and then when Antwerp concluded in the 1500s as the center of commerce in Europe, the story transitioned to Amsterdam. And so then I went and did the Amsterdam research, and it transitioned to England and the Bank of England. And then I knew where it was going, right? Because I had the Fed story and the Bitcoin story figured out in terms of how I was going to try to tell it. But the entire first 3 to 4 chapters of the book was, a full immersive research process. And I fell down a bunch of individual rabbit holes there, not all of which, make it into the book. But that's part of research. You got to filter out. And I made the book as short as possible because I didn't want to waste anybody's time. The book can be read in 1 or 2 days based on what I'm hearing. And I just didn't have the patience to write this 500-page book and tell all these side stories. This is an urgent message. Like, red alert, everybody out there. Bitcoin is here, and it is taking over. It's eating the whole monetary system in front of our eyes. Like, imagine if I had waited for Elon Musk to buy 1.5 billion of Bitcoin to start writing a book on it. No, it was urgent as shit. And so that's why, we just have to, dedicate 2020 to putting this message out. And the timing couldn't have been better. When I was literally putting the last few words on it, we struck Bitcoin's price at 34K on its 12th birthday. Awesome. And it actually reached like 40K by the end of that week. And I had to figure out where I was going to, because, I quote the price a few times, and I wanted to make it consistent throughout. So we picked 34K, the 12th birthday price.
Boss. Well, again, it's an incredible book because setting the historical context and then really setting the alarm bells off, like Bitcoin's here, should probably look into it. Going to be very important moving forward. Not only that, the fact that Bitcoin exists, that it's better, and that it will probably be widely adopted moving forward, and you should probably get in while you can. But alternatively, like the dollar is in disrepair, and that's like the one thing I love about the book is there's this visual aspect to it throughout, where you have these pyramids that sort of break down the layered money systems over time, and you get to the dollar system, and it just the amount of crap in that particular pyramid is like it just looks extremely complex, and just really highlights very succinctly and straightforwardly like how the dollar is in disrepair and how complex the dollar system has become at this point.
And that's the drive home message about chapters 5 and 6 and the dollar being in disrepair is that trying to actually understand every complexity of the dollar system and the Fed and offshore banking is not something that I was willing to do, in terms of education. It is so, and a lot of it is still above my head. And I've spent 10 years researching the Fed in an intensive way. And so trying to translate that into a book for the masses, which I did try to write a book for the masses, not for financial people necessarily, or even for Bitcoiners, but for anybody that's interested in what is happening with money today. And then to try to detail what the Fed is doing, I'm going to lose the reader. And I had to simplify it because I had helpful people in my circle that helped me say, hey, you know what, you lost me a little bit here. This is too dense. And so I had to back up and just drive home a couple points. Number one, it's incredibly complex. Number two, it kept breaking. It keeps breaking over the last 14 years now. It keeps periodically breaking. And each time it breaks, the Fed has to put more and more Band-Aids on the whole thing. And it's incredibly fragile today. And so that's all you need to know. Getting into the weeds on how exactly each part of the pyramid is broken, there are hundreds of Fed papers, BIS papers, and even books written on these individual ideas of the Eurodollar system being broken, repo being a broken mechanism now, interbank lending has been broken in some ways for 14 years. And other insurance mechanisms like credit default swaps or interest rate swaps, and how all of that counterparty risk had to be transferred off the books of each bank into clearinghouses, because otherwise, any bank that broke could break the whole system.
Just compounds the risk.
That's right. And so you don't have to get into the weeds to drive home the point that the dollar is in disrepair. And I don't want to claim that the dollar is going to break in the next couple years and Bitcoin just comes in and fixes every problem. No, it's going to be a longer transition. Bitcoin is positioning itself perfectly today, and people are naturally leaving the dollar for Bitcoin as we speak every day. So we don't need to mark the end of the dollar and mark the beginning of Bitcoin at any certain point in time. The end of the dollar arguably started in 2007. It's not ending tomorrow. It is in disrepair. And the beginning of Bitcoin happened in 2009. It hasn't taken over, but we're clearly past the first few steps on the way to a Bitcoin-centric financial system, or at least a situation where Bitcoin is a dominant force in the monetary system.
Yeah. And again, freaks, like you got to go get the book. And again, you didn't have to get into the weeds and actually the writing content of the book when describing the Fed. Again, these pyramid visualizations really drive the point home of how complex the system is. And you mentioned the repo markets, right? And 2009, that's something I've been harping on the last few weeks after the Wall Street bets thing, is because the repo markets had their spasm in September 2019 because there was some unexpected liquidity crunch because one bank wanted to move out of cash and into treasuries, and that caused a systemic like contagion in the overnight repo markets. The Fed had to step in. Again, the band-aid they added was expanding the list of primary dealers that have access to their window. They added the FICC, and then the FICC was used as a proxy to bail out hedge funds like Citadel, Point 72, and Millennium, who a couple turned out to be like at the center of the Wall Street bet story a couple weeks ago. That was like one of my theories. It's still one of my running theories with the whole Wall Street bets thing, is that the system is so systemically fragile that these Redditors, this Reddit army, the Tendy army, almost pulled forward a systemic collapse with this one stock. It's insane.
It is insane, and it's really fascinating. And we can actually draw a parallel to the crisis in long-term capital management, the hedge fund, 20 years ago. And that one hedge fund going under had the potential to break the entire system. And Alan Greenspan actually admitted to Congress that had they not bailed out LTCM via the investment banking counterparties of that hedge fund, there was a 50% chance that the whole thing would come down. And that was a decade before the great financial crisis of 07 to 09. And so if basically, here's the way to think about it. If the Fed doesn't come in and put the Band-Aid on when the crisis is happening, the house of cards comes down. And therefore, we have to assume now that every time there is a crisis, it's not even a question whether or not the Fed is going to come in. They're no longer the lender of last resort. They are the lender of only resort.
Yeah, it's crazy because you mentioned LTCM, Alan Greenspan, economy could collapse 2007, 2007, 2008. Hank Paulson goes to Ben Bernanke and President Obama, or excuse me, President Bush at the time, and basically warned Bush, like, hey, if we don't fix this right now, Americans aren't going to be able to get cash at the ATM on Monday morning. Like, that's how bad it was there. And like, again, they've only been compounding these issues over time with these band-aids. And again, like you had in 2019, one bank transitioned from cash to treasuries that had a systemic risk. And then a couple of weeks ago, a bunch of individuals decided to buy one stock. And there's a good argument to be made that that could have triggered a systemic collapse, which is extremely scary. But thank God we have Bitcoin, right? Like, so transitioning this into like a optimistic view of the future where we're not sort of beholden to the fragility of the US dollar system and the Federal Reserve system. Like, what type of hope does Bitcoin provide, and what do you envision this transition looking like?
Well, the problem with the current system is I don't see the Fed being able to naturally let banks or hedge funds that are fragile fail. They'll keep putting band-aids and papering over and bailing out to keep the zombie system going, to keep it alive. So the progression to a Bitcoin-based system happens in parallel. It happens at the same time. And so that's why I don't see some big collapse of the dollar and Bitcoin stepping in to replace it. People know the dollar is broken, so they're going to Bitcoin today. And so that transition is underway. And that's how I see it unfolding, is that we're going to a world of dual denomination where people, companies, countries are going to think both in dollars and Bitcoin terms. They're going to have to. We already see corporations now doing this. And I guarantee you, Marty, countries are already long. They just haven't announced it. you guys have talked about this a lot. You and Matt talk about this a lot. Who is long already? And it's a game theory on who's going to say that they're long first. But countries, central banks, commercial banks, investment banks, they're already very long Bitcoin, certain ones. And so they're mentally already dual denominated. At least the ones that are buying Bitcoin for the dollar hedge reason, not purely the speculation, but we think that the whole denomination is in jeopardy. So we have to have a parallel backup. It is an insurance policy. It is a hedge because it's an independent denomination. And also, this is also part of the reason why I wrote layered money, because in the layers of money, Bitcoin isn't underneath anything else. It is a numerical commodity. It's a commodity that comes from energy. This is a topic that you are very passionate about, is the link between energy and Bitcoin. It's a form of energy. It's a numerical commodity. It's a virtual commodity. And therefore it's nobody's liability. And that gives Bitcoin the opportunity to become an entire denomination because it's not subject to anything else.
Right.
And so Bitcoin is the first layer of money of the future.
Right. And it's crazy that the layer below that is energy, right? Like you said, there's no liability on your Bitcoin because you expended the energy, or miners did, to bring it to market. And that was, again, proof of work to imbue some sort of value. I mean, obviously the market participants who use Bitcoin for its properties imbue the value on it, but the energy expended to bring those Bitcoins to market, again, shows proof of work. And that something was done to, you're switching one good for another, and energy into Bitcoin. And so that's like I really love to pick your brain about this. And I think this is a great discussion, a great segue into the discussion of how this new layered monetary system may evolve. Is like, so I've been saying this pretty frequently on the podcast for the last couple of months, is like, I just have this nagging thought in my head that we're going to transition, like the financial stack of the future, the monetary stack of the future, right, is going to transition from the Fed window. So that where money is produced and distributed right now, it begins at the Fed window, and argue in conjunction with the Treasury in some regards, they work together. And then you have the financial stack built on that. You have the reserves and the commercial banking system and the investment banking system, and they use those reserves to give out loans and then create these financial products, whatever they may be. And so that financial stack starts at the Fed window and goes up from there. We're going to transition. Again, I love that you brought energy into this, into a new layered monetary system that begins at like the Bitcoin mining level, the mining pool level. And then you have these stacks built from there, whether it be, you have to start out with Bitcoin mining. Let's say you get Bitcoin, let's say you quote unquote produce it or have it distributed via the protocol, and then the miners distribute it to the market. And now with sophisticated derivatives products coming out, like hash rate derivatives, and now that the Lightning Network exists, you can start to see the beginnings of this layered monetary system budding from the Bitcoin mining industry up. And that's what we're going to transition to. Like I've been saying, the energy producers, who I believe will be the largest miners in the world, are going to be the central banks of the future, and not in the sense that they get to decide the supply or the interest rate tied to Bitcoin, but they are the base from which the new money is produced and distributed to the market, and the base from which that new monetary stack is built on.
Yes, and it brings up an interesting word that I on purpose left out of the book, but for months and months, I wrote, I wrote passages and passages about that one word, and the word is nonce. And the reason why I was so hyper focused on the word nonce in the book is because of exactly what you're saying, is that the origin of Bitcoin is the ability to find a number only used once by a mining algorithm. And that fundamentally is where Bitcoin comes from. It comes from this random numbers game that the miners play trillions of times a second. And I did end up leaving out the word nonce and, more just trying to illustrate the idea that a tidal wave of energy is required to discover Bitcoin today. And 10 years ago, it only took a laptop. And that growth in the energy dedicated to finding Bitcoin and protecting the network from attack is a vital concept to understand. So in the book, I call it a tidal wave of energy. But you and I know, and the freaks know, that it comes from the hashing algorithm. It comes from the proof of work that you have to put in to originate this new form of money. And yeah, I mean, on down goes the stack in terms of, the most basic way to think about it is that when people buy and sell Bitcoin on exchanges, they are owning in the interim just a Bitcoin balance. They're owning a second layer form of Bitcoin until they withdraw the coins. And so no matter how much they want self-custody, they are willing to make that trade-off to get utility out of it. And so they will hold second layer Bitcoin, meaning exchange deposits, completely counterparty based money now, because you have 100% exposure to the exchange. Forget insurance, forget all that. If the exchange goes away tomorrow, you lose your money. You don't have it. But people do make this trade every day by the billions now. And so we know that just like money is inherently hierarchical, Bitcoin is inherently hierarchical. It's the proof is in the pudding. People keep Bitcoin on exchanges. And so, but the ability to go between the first and the second layer in Bitcoin far exceeds anything in the traditional system, where you can actually get all the way up to the first layer, take custody, have no counterparty exposure, and be on par with any dominant financial force on the planet that also owns Bitcoin and has self-custody of it. And so I do see the system, and that's why I told the story of gold, a multi-century story of gold, because a Bitcoin system might unfold in a similar way. And I think it already has started.
Yeah. I think so too. And then, I can't stop thinking about our first conversation, right? Like we talked about the reference rate, real rate of return, or the risk-free rate of return on Bitcoin. Once that starts developing, then you'll see some real financialization around the protocol. And again, the Lightning Network has advanced significantly since our last discussion, and Lightning Pool specifically. Like, how does that ability to limit counterparty risk in a 2-2 multi-sig hash time lock contract, eventually a point time lock contract, to get yield on your Bitcoin to by loaning it out to people looking for liquidity on the Lightning Network? Does it throw a wrench in like the cycle of how these monetary systems have developed in the future, or in the past, excuse me?
So potentially, yes. And it is why I wrote The Time Value of Bitcoin, to explore that very idea that income can happen in a non-counterparty way. And that's very powerful. But, not to burst the bubble of the brilliant people at Lightning Labs and their product, but it's only one component of a Bitcoin-based capital market.
Mm-hmm.
And let's be honest, the size that you can put into the Lightning Network and actually earn the yield, it doesn't compare to some of the exchange lending or deposit lending that you can do with counterparties now in Bitcoin. And I don't want to pump any particular lending platform in Bitcoin terms in particular, but think of it in this way. You have now two different ways to earn money in Bitcoin. One has theoretically no counterparty risk and more has this channel management risk and technical risk like Lightning. And the other is custodian lending, deposit lending, like these companies that are growing in size and are sponsoring a bunch of your podcast competitors and whatnot in the industry. So, but these types of companies, these deposit-based companies, are also forming ways where they have degrees of proof of reserves, insurance mechanisms, transparency to the custodian level, and they're putting an architecture in their counterparty risk that minimizes the risk of the counterparty exposure itself. So I'm not saying that if you put your money on a deposit scenario that you don't have counterparty risk, but there is a technological innovation in the minimization of counterparty risk in the new system. Because we have Bitcoin, we have a blockchain where we have transparency and we have signatures and we can do proof of reserves and things of that nature. So that is just as powerful as the Lightning stuff. The Lightning stuff is great because it's non-counterparty and it's a total game changer, but that doesn't mean that we should ignore these other advancements even within the counterparty exposed arena, if that, makes sense.
No, it does. Definitely does. Especially when you consider the LTV ratios that are floating around too. A lot of these, some of that risk is significantly reduced by over collateralizing. I know Unchained just disclaimer, sponsored the pod. I know they recently up their collateralization threshold minimum because they don't want to liquidate their customers, and the ability to have like a 2 or 3 multi-sig in which you hold one key and you can track to make sure your Bitcoin is not being rehypothecated is great. But then even if they do want to rehypothecate, you can have them, the service provider, provide a proof of reserves at some point in the future, right?
Yeah, it's very powerful. Shout out to Unchained. Shout out to Parker, Drew. They're doing a great job, and I chatted with Parker this week, and just to hear what they're up to, and in the context of how do I explain certain Bitcoin companies to members of the asset management industry, investment management, when they're thinking about their clients. And the way that Unchained is doing things, they're thinking about the whole picture, and they're thinking about counterparty exposure from the ground up. And that's what multi-sig is all about. It's about this idea that we can diversify our risk in Bitcoin, and the risk in Bitcoin is the management of private keys. And so if you can mitigate the management of private key risk, that is an advance, and that is a service. And companies like Unchained are working on that and doing a great job.
Yeah. And again, comparing it to layered monetary systems of the past, technically at some points you could go to a bank and ask them to show you the gold, but you never know who else had claims on that gold, right? And how does this affect capital allocation in your mind? And does it, rehypothecation arguably could be reduced significantly if customers and consumers demand these type of proof of reserve systems and demand to hold a key when interacting with these counterparties? How does, is the stack very conservative?
Yeah, there's only one way to answer this question, Marty, is that people aren't bullish enough, man. Let me tell you why. That's the only way I can answer this. The fact that you're asking this question today, and that we're talking about this idea, that the idea of rehypothecation and proof of reserves and is the collateral there. Every company now on the planet post Elon, it's a post Elon era now, is going to be asking these exact questions. And many of them will come to the conclusion that unless we have self-custody, multi-sig custody, or custody with proof of reserves, we don't own the Bitcoin. And then the scramble intensifies. So you literally can't be bullish enough when thinking about the fact that the world is going to ask this question for the first time in 2021 at a price above $45,000 Bitcoin, like at $1 trillion now. They're finally asking the question at $1 trillion. So yeah, people just aren't bullish enough, man.
You get me all bullish now.
But stay humble. But stay humble.
Let's stay humble. Let's stay humble. But it's true, right? Like you think of, again, the domino effect is simply like Elon just bought $1.5 billion worth of Bitcoin, like $300 million more than Saylor did, but he's got like almost half the Bitcoin that he was able to get. And you think like that understanding starts to permeate throughout boardrooms across America, across the world, and you have this mad dash, and the free flow to Bitcoin is decreasing. Obviously, more Bitcoin are being produced every block, but still, even with that, you look at the charts on Glassnodes of people pulling their coins off exchange and sucking out liquidity from the order books, and you think about,
and that's why the memes are so powerful, because if someone asks you today, oh, is it too late? Am I too late to Bitcoin? The only answer is you obviously haven't run the numbers. You just haven't run them, because if you have, you know that the answer to that question is no, it's not too late. It's just starting. And the numbers, and when people say run the numbers, there are several numbers that you have to run to give yourself the context. One of them is the 21 million. One of them is the 18.5 million coins that are currently there. One is the several million Bitcoin that will never be spoken for again, that have been lost, etc. One is the stock of dollar debt on the planet, 300 trillion. One is the stock of gold in dollar terms, which is 10 trillion. And you have to run all of these numbers to reach this conclusion that no, it's not too late. It's actually just at the beginning.
Yeah, there's negative yielding debt in there, like a bunch of other stuff, and it's crazy. And another thing, like, so we're only talking in the context of sucking float out of the market in terms of store value. Like, I think Preston Pish had a really good thread the other day, included in the newsletter, right? Like, even if some of these corporate entity, or not even corporate, but some of these funds want to take advantage of Bitcoin's price volatility and trade the futures markets, that, like, at the end of the day, those are cash settled, and you have to buy Bitcoin to trade those markets both ways too. So you have this compounding effect of entities using it as a store of value and pulling that liquidity off the market, and then other entities just using it as a speculative vehicle and needing to pull more supply off the market as well. Like you said, people aren't bullish enough, and you think of the compounding effects of those two things alone, let alone like retail getting in and a bunch of other things. It's almost impossible to fathom. Like I've been saying, today's newsletter, I'm actually going to throw some cold water on everybody and be like, hey, just like let's take a step back, like think adversarial a little bit, but like still, like it's just like, so posterity I could be, hey, look, I was like saying, hey, let's keep all the options on the table. But when you think of all this stuff, it's like hard not to be like, oh my God, this is gonna go super high, super fast. And the cultural aspect of it too. Like there's been a tipping point culturally where it's almost seems like a foregone conclusion to a bunch of people.
It has been a tipping point culturally in the last 6 months, in the last 2 months, in the last 2 weeks, for sure. And that's very exciting. And, the other point is that there's just not that much Bitcoin available. And this is why the Bitcoin Standard and Seyfedin's book it's why so many people identified with it, is because the point that he drove home, the point that everybody took home, is there is no supply response like in Econ 101. there is no supply response in Bitcoin. And that,
Completely inelastic.
yeah, it's completely inelastic. And Safe illustrated this to everybody. And I actually hadn't even read his book when we went to Dallas for BitBlock Boom in 2018. And so when I saw him speak on stage about this, obviously I had run the numbers already, so I knew that, right? But I knew that there was no supply response because I had studied the algorithm and how it worked. But when he illustrated that, it was a game changer for millions around the world, I think. And part of the reason why hodlers are so strong today, it's partly because of that illustration from Safe.
Yeah. And again, like similarly to layered money, like going to the history of money and how it's evolved. It's crazy to think how ignorant most of the world is to this evolution and to the properties of money and the function of money and why it works the way it does and how it works the way it does and how you should want your money to work.
Yeah, and Saifedean, he taught a lot of people about money with his book. And so I wanted to do something similar where I wanted to teach people about money with my book. So I wanted to write something very different from his. His is an econ book. Mine is a capital markets type of book. It's written through the lens of a bond trader, not the lens of an economist. And I thought that it could be a complement to his for people that want to think of money again from the beginning, but from a price perspective, from a security perspective, from a trading perspective, and so it's definitely the Bitcoin Standard showed us that a book about Bitcoin can have demand, and like it can sell, and it's even a career option for me. So there's a lot that the book helped inspire, and I hope to one day replace Safe with layered money as the book that everyone recommends about Bitcoin. That was the goal. There's no shame in telling everyone that the goal was to write the best book ever written about Bitcoin. And I hope that the book lives on and that people will use it as an educational resource around the world. A lot of languages are coming down this year. I've already sold the rights to translations in a couple Asian countries already. And Spanish is something that I might be heavily involved in myself. With some help, I might self-publish the Spanish one as well, or I might, use a third party for that. But this book is going to go around the world this year, and I'm just really pumped. Go check it out, Layered Money. I'm just really excited for it.
No, I am as well. And like Safe tweeted out last week, like he's had the 3 best months of sales ever, and the book's been out for quite a while now. Like
it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. It's inspiring also to know how many human beings read books still. It's like, wow, okay, people really actually are still reading. And if you are on social media or other mainstream media, sometimes it's tough to remember that that's not most of the world what they're doing. Most of the world is doing their own thing and trying to work on themselves and make themselves better. And the demand for the audiobook has been the most insane thing ever. Now that I study the Amazon charts, I know that the audiobook, when it comes out, will outsell the paperback and the Kindle easily. The demand is insane. Guy Swan has finished recording. I'm going over it right now. It'll be out soon, guys. I promise it'll be out really soon.
Oh yeah. No, I was gonna say Guy got that smooth southern drawl.
It's so good. It's so good. I'm listening this morning and just taking some notes here or there, but he killed it. It was a no-brainer too. Like I knew 6 months ago that I would ask Guy to read the book when it was done. So it's been a fun partnership, and it's been cool working with him. And we can't wait to put it out together. We are co-producing it. So, the way that it works on Audible is you have the potential to split the royalties with your narrator. So we are 50-50 partners in it, and it's happy to be in business with Guy.
Hell yeah. Yeah. Obligatory is Clubhouse going to disrupt books? Probably
Yeah,
not.
I found myself on Clubhouse for the first couple times this week. Interesting platform. I like it.
Interesting. I think it's a honeymoon phase that I think everybody's overhyping a little bit.
It
I
might
was hyping
be.
it.
It might be. It also seems like it's more of like a quarantine, like people are just have a little bit more time to do that kind of thing. But
And also a longing, right, for interaction with people.
There's a
outside
longing
the
for interaction.
pod.
Yeah, that's really what it is. Like people just really wanting to just chat again. But cool platform. We'll see.
Yeah, I'm liking books. I got some old books downstairs I have to read. Yeah, dude, we've got better part of 8 billion people to educate about money, the history of money, and the future of money. So I'm pretty bullish on layered money. The context and the direction that you take the book, starting from a historical perspective, and again the visuals, like really highlighting how complex the money system has gotten under the Federal Reserve and the Eurodollar system. Like the Eurodollar just still blows my mind, like how it even operates. It's a very big black pool, dark pool in my mind. I think that's actually what it's defined as. But yeah, man, I'm pumped for you. I am excited that you wrote this book and happy that people are going to be able to learn about money. It's important. Like, and that's what I say on this podcast all the time: fix the money, fix the world. Bitcoin is here to do that. Layered money explains how it does that, and comparing it to the monetary system we had today and systems we've had throughout the centuries. So props to you.
Thank you, man. And I do acknowledge the freaks in the book. If you guys read the acknowledgments, I thank everybody that read The Time Value Bitcoin. And the reason why I thank everybody that read The Time Value Bitcoin is because it was you all that helped me find my path to becoming a writer about Bitcoin and a writer just in general. Because I was only a bond trader at that time. And I thought of myself as a researcher, but never thought of myself as a writer until that article dropped. You had me on the pod. We met in Dallas. People started reading it and said, when are you going to write more about Bitcoin and the Lightning Network? So shout out to all the freaks and, really everybody that read The Time Value of Bitcoin in 2018.
I didn't get to the acknowledgments yet. The freaks, man. It's strong. It's a strong contingent. It's it like that. I think again, like at that point in time when you put out The Time Value of Bitcoin, people are like, all right, how does this evolve from here? And I think that piece particularly really sort of set a flag in the ground to like sort of start marching towards and be like, all right, this is probably how it's going to develop. And so
there was a capital market vision for Bitcoin back then that I had and others shared. And the mission was world reserve currency. The mission was world reserve currency before that, but then it was like, okay, how do we progress toward there using their game against them, using their language, using their structure and architecture? And how can we define Bitcoin in this new way that basically steals the important stuff and rids the system of everything else?
Yeah. I love the shout out to Nas too. Just looking at the acknowledgments there.
Hey, listen, hip hop made me. And it's funny, like when people ask me, oh, who's your favorite author, or like who's your favorite writer? It's all MCs. It's like Nas and Jay-Z and Tupac and Talib Kweli. It's
rest in peace, MF Doom, man.
Rest in peace, Doom. It's not other authors. So I take a lot of inspiration from hip hop. I gave up pretty much everything in my life during 2020 to write this book, in terms of my hobbies, except for hip hop. I needed 30 to 45 minutes in my car listening to my music every day in order to get the creative juices going so that I could come home and continue writing this story for everybody. So yeah, Nas is my favorite rapper and my favorite writer and poet. So that's why he got one.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I think J-Rock and Kendrick's Wow freestyle really is a song that describes Bitcoin. Fuck your plan, I'm gonna burn that castle. It's sick murder when I say go.
Hey, listen, Marty, we could have done the whole pod on hip hop, dude. We just could have talked hip hop the whole time and just not even talked about Bitcoin. So
yeah. Well, next time.
Next time.
There's going to be plenty more times to do this. You have a wide open invitation to Tales from the Crypt whenever.
Thank you, brother.
You feel that you need to say something. So again, thank you for coming on, taking some time to walk through Layered Money today. Thank you for writing the book, Freaks. If you haven't already, go check it out. Like Nick mentioned, Guy Swan's smooth Southern drawl is going to be hitting the airwaves. Reading this book to whoever wants to get the audiobook. What else should we know before we part here, Nick? Any final thoughts? Any words of wisdom for the freaks out there?
I'm excited to hear all of your feedback on the book, truly. So leave a review on Amazon, send me a DM, contact me at layeredmoney.com. Let me know what you think of the book. Let me know what I should write next in 2-3 years when that time comes. And just go check out the book. It's a life's work. So it would make me happy to know that there are more and more readers out there.
Yeah. Well, speaking of next book, I'd love to help you out with some Bitcoin native financial products and stack. That's like something that gets my juices flowing. So Nick, thank you. It's morning where you are. I hope you have a great rest of your morning, great rest of your day. Tell your wife I said what's up, and we'll do this again at some point next year, next 6 months, whatever.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Marty. I appreciate it, man.
Thank you. Peace and love, freaks.